Now, the gap on my sketch where my right hand index finger is here, this one, if you look at the actual painting over here, there's an area here that indicates a slight change to the pattern. So what we're dealing with is a potential area of interest, okay? I hope you can see that. You see how the design in my tree trunks and branches opens up a lot more in this area, okay? There's an opening there where there's no trees in the sketch, because up from the right hand side up to this point, it's all quite tight, and from the left also up to about there, it's all quite tight. Because one thing that you'll need to be doing today is working in the negative. So I'm just going to give you a very quick brief as to how this is going to work. We won't be thinking about the sky in the initial stages. What we'll be doing is creating an interesting mass of color, okay, right across the paper. Excuse me. So we'll be working with some thicker mixes, some more watery mixes. We'll be angling our board to help the paint run a little bit. So what we'll create is a very abstract looking mass of interesting color. And the color is very, very important. We want to avoid mixing dirty colors, okay? And I'll explain how we avoid doing that as we go. But also in my actual painting, if you notice, there's a little glimmer of a sun just about here. Now, we could sort of say, well, that's our focal point. It's very subtle. There certainly is no focal point in the traditional sense, in that, you know, we'll have put the grid on top of the image and we'll have decided that the focal point was going to go up here, or it was going to go down there, or here, or here. But nonetheless, although this composition and design doesn't show off its focal point in any obvious statement, there is still areas of interest. So I suppose what I'm really saying is avoid going from left to right or right to left. Avoid going from one side of your design to the other with exactly the same pattern, okay? Because quite simply, that's going to be boring and nobody's going to want to look at it. We're more in that area of fine art, semi-abstract territory in this type of painting. So once we've created all this beautiful, juicy colors, and most of that will be from colors like alizarin crimson with a little bit of the yellow mixed in, a little bit of the burnt sienna, sometimes the alizarin crimson with the green, the dark green. But that's how we created, and we're going to almost obliterate the entire paper with that type of application of paint. So what I want you to be thinking is along these lines. Look at how the colors vary in terms of brightness or intensity, if you like. It's called saturation, color saturation, where the color is close to its tube color as it comes out of the tube. And then it goes into some dark areas, but there's a sort of textural quality to these shapes. So once we've created an interesting mass of color over our paper, then we create the scene. Then we actually sculpt out of that paint the background. So it's this is what's meant, you know, by negative space painting. We create the positive shapes. We create the trees and their trunks and branches by painting the background, by painting the sky behind. So I love what, you know, it's a great way of working, and trust me, it helps in your other endeavors. You know, when you're painting in watercolor, there's quite a lot of use, or there should be, as you develop as a painter. You should always be considering the use of negative spaces, using the negative space to create your positive spaces. Hope that makes sense. And any questions, of course, I'll answer if I can, as later or as we go through. Okay, now that doesn't mean, folks, that if you can still put out a sketch, and that's the reason why I did offer a sketch. You can still sketch in your ideas, because it sort of literally does give you an idea. It sort of sets you up. You might not see any of your sketch by the end of the painting. It's unlikely that you will, actually. But as I say, the benefit of sketching it is to exercise your ideas at this early stage. Okay, I want you to think of these trees looking something like anything but sort of carbon copies of each other. If the think about the horizontal measurements of your shapes. Okay, maybe the tallest one is over here somewhere, and it reaches that line up there. Maybe it's skinny and it's elongated and it comes down close to, sort of this line you've made down here. Maybe the one next to it is almost a little square shape sat to the side of it up here, or down there somewhere to the side of it. Okay, but this helps you think about the space behind as well. So let's say maybe I'm sure that this design that you're looking at on my pencil, I'll go in a bit bolder so you can see it better. I'm sure this design that you're looking at now won't it's not going to be very obvious perhaps by the end of the painting. But as I say, the purpose of doing this is to really get your brain in the right place, even though you're going to lose this sketch. So enjoy it. There's no penalty here for getting this sketch wrong, because it's going to be lost, but it is going to set your brain up to be thinking in the right way. I suppose it's accessing the left brain hemisphere, that side of the brain that you find your creativity. Okay, now do we leave a gap anywhere in here? Maybe, or we do something similar to the painting that I've offered, but there's no way that the reason why I chose to offer this as a workshop is because there is no way as good. Don't get me wrong, what I'm about to say, that there's no way that you can copy my actual piece here. Okay, you could follow it, definitely. You can get something that resembles it, and there is nothing wrong in copying other people's work. Of course, there's benefits to that, in fact. And I'd never turn around to anybody and say, oh, stop copying people. It's we all do. I did for years. Try to find artwork that's reputable. Find a good artist to sort of copy their work, because you will learn quite a lot from that. But at some point in your development, in your progress, you've got to try cycling without those stabilizer wheels on. You've got to go for it. You've got to bite the bullet and have a go at the creative side of it, because there's two parts to painting, and that's the technical ability and the practical abilities that you develop, and of course, equally as important, your sense of creativity, your creative, the creative side of your work. So look what I've got here. I've been talking while I've been making these shapes. I've got a gap through there, whether that stays or not. I mean, none of this will stay, but whether it sort of stays in my ideas when I work through is another thing. Now, the ground level, I don't know, somewhere down here, isn't it? And what I really like when I work with these designs is if I end up with a nice vertical tree trunk about here somewhere, I like to bring the ground up to it like this, and you end up with that. You end up with these sort of a little where the ground meets the tree trunk and it comes up like this. It pulls everything together. They're speaking to each other. The tree tops, the tree canopies are speaking to the ground. They're connecting.
Before we continue, please consider subscribing to my channel, and if you want immediate notifications as to when I upload a new video, then please remember to also click on the bell icon.
So they're not just sort of straight lines that disappear somewhere you know, inanimately into the ground. There's a shape down here that joins, that says I belong to this, you know, tree here. Yeah, so I'm just putting out some colors, and I'm going to start, when we do start painting, I'm going to start with alizarin crimson. We'll first of all get some paint on here. There'll be some angling of the board, and I'm hoping that you'll see some techniques today that you know, you might not have considered before. Let's do a bit. Let's get some paint down. I'm going to be using a 1-inch acrylic flat brush. Okay, I'll show you my paint, how much I put out. Do you want something about the size of a grape to start off with? Smaller, lesser amount of the alizarin crimson. Notice there's no white at the moment. Okay, I'm not using any white at this stage, because adding white at this early stage potentially will leave you with a very chalky looking painting. Oops, just squeeze out this bit of yellow up here, perhaps. Right, now the fun begins. Now then, I'm going to try and keep that in the picture for you, so you can see what I'm doing. Incidentally, I'm working on a disposable palette here, okay, which are quite, I use different things, and I like to show you the different things when I'm using them. I sometimes use a metal camping plate. The reason why I've turned my attention to this type of palette at the moment is because it's disposable, and it's probably more eco-friendly. It's friendlier to the planet in that once the paint is dried out on here, you know, you can scrumple it up and it can go through your normal recycling outlets as a dry, inert product. So let me take some water here. So just put the brush in the water. I'm going to start with alizarin crimson, okay, and watery to start off with. Okay, I'll very quickly go in. Look how random this is. It's just an application of paint. You can put it on any way you want. Let's pick up a bit of that yellow. I will mix it slightly on the paper, sorry, on the palette, but I'll eventually, I do like to keep my mixes as much on the paper as possible. But a little bit of mixing on the palette is okay. You don't really need to worry about edges either. It's not like watercolor, where I'd be sort of saying now, you know, oh, you must get into that edge over there before it dries hard edge. Just put it, and even though your trees, this is really, really important, even though your trees may live down here, you know, nothing going above where my hand is, you need to paint beyond that. You need to take this color almost, as I said earlier, right the way across your paper, okay? Varying it, you know, look at how the yellow brings a vibrancy to that. This is so liberating. This is the freedom of painting this way. It's just the best feeling in the world. So come right down to the ground, into the ground as well. To be honest, I'm not sure that I need to leave any white paper at all here. Let's just cover this paper, okay? But covering it in a way by way you can see a bit of yellow in places. A little be really mean with the burnt sienna. That's why I didn't mean to put that much out. But be mean with the burnt sienna, because that can potentially make the colors go a little bit muddy. What's the brush stroke? They're quite big, look, some of them, while others are really stubby brush marks, but they do change direction all the time. So can we enhance on? You'll get to a point, as I am now, and I'm thinking, well, can't really improve on this. I've got, yellows in good places. Remember what if we said, if there's a sun over here somewhere, we might want to intensify the yellow in that area like this. But leave the white where it is at the moment in its tub. Don't use any. I'm just looking now for pale areas where it looks a little thin. I want a fairly good coating of paint throughout. And I put out way too much paint, to be honest. But there's a danger also that you don't put out enough. There's a very, you look at this painting now and you ask yourself, how is that going to look like that? Not in a million years, but this is how a lot of paintings are developed, because it just adds quality and depth to the finished work. Burnt sienna that I applied down here does sort of warm things up a little bit. Subtle, very subtle, but it does. And I probably, and it doesn't matter if you've gone up here with your burnt sienna, it doesn't matter at all, because we can paint on top of it. But I'm thinking by the end of this painting, the only place where I'm probably going to use burnt sienna to any effect is in the ground. We must think of our next plan of action. And I would start considering putting some darker mixes. So you'll see the green come out with green and alizarin crimson mixed partially on the palette, but also a little bit on the painting itself. Once that's on, we need to vary the consistency of that mix. I mean with water, how much water, and then we'll probably assist the rundown, the vertical rundowns off that paint. So it obviously has to be watery enough for it to run down your board. As I say, you'll see me lift mine up and tilt it like that, so the paint runs from north to south, and that sort of helps make some of the tree trunks. Okay, not all of the tree trunks will be made that way, but as some of the other tree trunks will be made by the cutting out. There we are. I've just lifted off anywhere I thought might be harboring a little bit of paint that's too wet. There's still damp areas. I can still see them. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. So what we're going to do now, as I say, is we're going to create a slightly darker mix, and we're going to be playing with the angle of the board. I was very heavy with my pencil work, so I can still see my design. How much will I stick to it is another question. It's just a nice little sort of starting point. So let's start with a bit of green, okay, a bit of alizarin crimson, and I don't want to mix that too much. Here comes the water, and this often comes as a bit of a surprise. If we were asked to mix a purple, we would say blue and red. Well, this is green and red, so how come I'm getting purple? The reason for that is because cold reds have a bit of blue in them. Cold greens have a bit of blue in them. So that there's enough blue in that mix to make a purple. Okay, enough blue and red, of course. So here goes. It's very random. I'm going to sort of very watery too, probably too watery at the moment. So keep your board on the flat at this stage. Here's a little bit of alizarin crimson on its own, so there's less water in that. And then maybe I'll concentrate on the lower parts of the trees, assuming that that would be a shadowed area on the tree anyway. Again, I'm picking up more paint, sometimes just the deep red. Okay. Sometimes just the green. Perhaps the green will go in about there. Look how dark that is. The reason why this is such a dark mix, it's so easy to make this mixed dark is because they're both transparent colors, and it's in your transparent colors that you'll get your darkest darks, and that goes for any medium, watercolor, oil. So opaque paints will not, you'll have a, it's virtually impossible to make a dark from opaque paints, simply because there's so much white in opaque paints. It can be done, which defeats the object. I don't know why you'd do it, but once you put your opaque colors together, you'd need to put black in it. Well, I've yet to find a purpose for an opaque mix of paints that need to go dark. So here we go. Now then, I don't think this is going to run if I lift my board now. There's not enough water there, okay? But the shapes are there. That's the thing. And this is why this is a twofold, a two-part stage. I don't think that's not going to run in a million years. There's not enough water in there. So let's pick up some of those colors again. And we'll say, and do this bit at a time. Don't expect the whole thing to run south, okay? Just I hold my board over my easel here, which is fairly flat. The paint that runs off will just land on this surface. I'm going to keep my board up here while I work. So I think you can get the gist of what I'm doing here. I'm just piling in the water and the paint just for it all to run south. Let's have something there. But notice when I go over here like that, whoops, let me just bring it into focus. When I go over here like that, it's an isolated shape above the other mass, but it still has its own little rundown there. I'm in danger by putting that one there. I'm in danger of things looking very static, flat across here, because you must undulate the top of this design, okay? It mustn't be like a hard line there and a hard line down here. There must be a toothy, if there's such a word. It must be a very irregular line against the background. It doesn't matter if it is for the moment. If you've got quite a regular shape to this, it doesn't really matter, because of course, beauty of this is that we will be sculpting the background anyway and changing it. Down you go. See if we can make this run just about there. So I hold the brush there with water and paint in it. There it goes. Off it goes on its little route south. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So let's have something about there. I'll help it on its way by using the brush there. The other things you could do, if you really want to if you want a lot more of these tree trunks very quickly, if you and I do sometimes, I sort of run out of patience a little bit doing the same thing over and over. What I will do is, if I just show you, I'll grab a rigger brush. This is the rigger brush, and pick up some paint with the rigger brush and just help some lines down, but don't do this too much. Don't do too much of this even. Just one or two. Perhaps you're helping some down that haven't quite made it all the way to the bottom. And if all those rundowns don't make it all the way to the bottom anyway, that's fine. That's also good. Remember, the ground level is going to be down here somewhere, like here, okay? But yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that we've all got a good show of tree trunks, because you can't, well, you can put them in afterwards. Again, you know, there is, of course, there is this thought, and I have painted these paintings this way before. I've just obliterated everything with dark, okay, only to sort of cut into that dark mass that's below here to make my tree trunks. But I personally feel working this way rather than just obliterating that entire lower area, it just offers a bit more depth again, because you will end up being able to create lighter colored tree trunks this way, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that if you just obliterated that lower territory with just everything and made everything dark there. All your tree trunks are going to be dark if you did work that way. Do we need to put in the you know, do we need to show off the ground at this stage? I'm going to. You don't have to. It's something that could be done at the end. But what I do want to show you this, so I do want your attention, folks, for this bit. If you're going to put the ground in, give it some consideration, because I mentioned earlier, when you have a tree trunk meeting the ground, what I want you to do is take that little bit of land up each time to the tree trunk, okay, like this. So you're creating that sort of kissing point there. You know, it's not just a straight vertical disappearing into the ground. There is ground there that wants to welcome it. I'm just looking at some shapes that I like. So I suggest you do something similar. You need to sort of almost stop at this point and say, well, let's develop an area that I really like. It may be that your eyes picked up on a really interesting edge or cluster of shapes over here. Well, if they're that good, don't touch them. Don't go anywhere near them. Leave them be. But if you see there's something developing and you know you can, or you get a fair idea that you could further enhance it, then that's the area to be working on. I feel on this painting that this is not the place, whereas it was on this painting, to go close to the ground. There's something saying to me, to my psyche, to my idea of balance, aesthetic balance, that the lower territory would look good here, not there. So that's what I'm doing, making a shape much closer to the ground over here. So is there a focal point at this stage? As I said earlier, you know, it's not obvious. This is a very random, semi-abstract painting.
Okay, folks, that brings us to the end of part 1. Part 2 you will be able to see next week. It will be uploaded to YouTube in a week's time from today. So hope you've enjoyed this. Please be sure to tune in for the next session, part 2. And if you like what you've already seen, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button, and of course hit the bell icon if you want notification of that new release as and when it's uploaded. You get immediate notification as to when part 2 will be uploaded. So thanks for your company. Hope to see you in the next one.